Hi, I'm Lily Blue. Negative thoughts can be so persistent, can't they? They often creep in and make themselves at home when we least expect it. In this video, I will share some thoughts on the challenge of dealing with these unwelcome mental guests and how they can affect us. We often think that fighting negative thoughts will help us overcome them, but it turns out that resisting them can make them stronger. I've found this to be true in my own life. For years, whenever a negative thought popped into my head, I'd try to push it away, thinking that if I just ignored it or fought against it hard enough, it would disappear. But instead, it seemed like the more I resisted, the more these thoughts would dig in their heels. I remember a particularly challenging period when I was constantly anxious about my career and future. Every time I had a fearful thought about not being successful, I'd try to forcefully shut it out. Instead of easing my anxiety, it felt like I was fueling it. It was like playing a game of tug-of-war with my mind. What I've learned is that negative thoughts are a bit like waves in the ocean. If you fight against them, you might end up struggling more. But if you acknowledge them without judgment and let them pass through, they lose their power. Practically, this means allowing yourself to feel whatever you're feeling without adding more weight to it by trying to push it away. For me, this shift came when I started using mindfulness techniques, just noticing the thought, observing it, and letting it go without getting caught up in it. When we stop battling with our thoughts, we start to experience more peace. It's not about letting negativity take over, but rather about not letting it control us. By accepting our thoughts with compassion and understanding, we create space for more positive and balanced thinking to emerge. Our minds often trap us in negativity through what's known as Maya or illusion. This concept from Eastern philosophy highlights how our perception of reality is distorted, creating a false sense of limitations and problems. I've seen this play out in my own life many times. For example, when I was grappling with self-doubt, I found that my mind would conjure up scenarios that seemed all too real. I'd think, I'm not good enough, or I'll never succeed, and these thoughts felt like undeniable truths. But as I started to explore this idea of Maya, I realized these weren't objective realities, they were illusions crafted by my mind. It's like being in a room full of mirrors that reflect only your insecurities and fears. The more you look at them, the more you believe that's all there is. But when you take a step back, you see that these reflections are just tricks of the light, not the true essence of who you are. Recognizing Maya means understanding that these negative thoughts and distorted perceptions are not reality, they're just mental constructs. By questioning these illusions and stepping outside of them, we start to see a more balanced view of ourselves and our lives. It's liberating to realize that we're not bound by these illusions, but can choose to see beyond them. This shift in perception can be incredibly freeing. Instead of being ensnared by the negative patterns your mind creates, you begin to see them for what they are, temporary distortions that can be dissolved with a little awareness and understanding. Focusing too much on getting rid of negative thoughts can sometimes make them even stronger. There was a period when I was determined to cleanse my mind of any negative thinking. I'd set goals to think positively and push away anything that felt contrary. But what happened was the exact opposite. The more effort I put into eradicating these thoughts, the more they seemed to dominate my mental space. It was as though my fixation on them was giving them more power. This cycle happens because the more attention and energy we give to something we want to avoid, the more it can take hold. It's like trying not to think of a pink elephant. You can't help but picture it as soon as you're told not to. When we're intensely focused on removing negativity, we're often amplifying it instead. A helpful shift is to redirect our attention rather than fight against negative thoughts. Instead of trying to erase them, it can be more effective to gently acknowledge their presence and then focus on what brings us joy or fulfillment. This approach doesn't give power to negative thoughts, but rather encourages a balance where positive experiences naturally take precedence. By shifting our focus from eliminating negativity to fostering positivity, we create a more harmonious mental environment. It's not about ignoring or denying negative thoughts, but about gently guiding our attention toward what uplifts and supports us. Embracing your thoughts without judgment can truly transform your inner world. I found that when I started to accept my thoughts as they were, instead of trying to control or judge them, my entire approach to my inner life shifted. For a long time, I thought that acceptance meant resignation, but it's quite the opposite. Acceptance means acknowledging what's there without adding layers of self-criticism or resistance. I used to fight against thoughts of doubt and fear, but this only seemed to make them more intense. When I began practicing self-compassion, I found that those same thoughts became less overwhelming. One practical tip I've discovered is to practice mindfulness. Whenever a negative thought arises, rather than pushing it away or berating myself for having it, I simply notice it. I tell myself, this thought is here, and that's okay. The practice of letting go sounds simple, but wow, can it be challenging? We often hold on to negative thoughts like there's some kind of safety net, even though they're just weighing us down. Over the years, I've come across a few techniques that have genuinely helped me release that grip and find a bit more peace. For instance, during moments of stress, I'd sit quietly and simply observe my thoughts as they came and went. Instead of getting swept up in them, I'd notice them as they arose and then faded. It felt like watching clouds drift across the sky, there, then gone. This shift in perspective helped me realize that I am not my thoughts. I'm the observer, the one who witnesses them without getting entangled. One practical tip I found useful is to label your thoughts as they come. For example, you might think, here's a thought about work, or there's a worry about the future. By labeling them, you create a bit of distance between yourself and your thoughts. This distance helps you see them as temporary and not as defining aspects of who you are. Another aspect of mindfulness is to focus on the present moment. Negative thoughts often arise when we dwell on the past or worry about the future. Bringing my attention back to the present, by focusing on small things like the sensation of your breath or the feeling of your feet on the ground, you anchor yourself in the present. This practice makes it easier to see thoughts for what they are, just passing events in the mind. One of my favorites is cord cutting, a practice from various spiritual traditions. It involves visualizing yourself cutting the energetic ties that bind you to negative thoughts. I imagine a light surrounding me and golden scissors snipping away the threads of negativity. It's empowering to actively release what no longer serves you. Breathwork is another game changer for me. The 4-7-8 technique, breathing in for 4 counts, holding for 7, and exhaling for 8, calms my nervous system and clears my mind. When negative thoughts start to spiral, this focused breathing brings me back to the center. Mantras also hold great power. Repeating a positive phrase like, I release what I cannot control, helps shift my mindset and reminds me to let go. It's a way of giving myself permission to trust the process and not hold on so tightly. Understanding that both positive and negative thoughts are integral to our experience can deepen your spiritual journey. I've found that embracing the full spectrum of thoughts, rather than trying to reject or eliminate the negative ones, opens up a richer and more nuanced path to growth. For a long time, I was caught up in the idea that I needed to only focus on the positive to be spiritually evolved. I thought that if I could just push away the negativity, I'd reach some higher state of enlightenment. But what I've learned is that both positive and negative thoughts have their place in our growth. They're like two sides of the same coin, each offering valuable insights. When I started to see negative thoughts not as enemies, but as part of the human experience, something shifted. It's like looking at a painting where both light and dark shades contribute to the overall beauty. By acknowledging and accepting both types of thoughts, I began to understand that they both have something to teach me. Embracing both positive and negative thoughts allows for a more balanced and holistic approach to spirituality. It's not about clinging to the positive and rejecting the negative, but rather about recognizing that both are essential for our development and understanding. Navigating the labyrinth of our minds can be quite an adventure, can't it? We've all been there, stuck in loops of negative thinking, feeling like we're wandering through dark, confusing corridors. But here's something I've learned: just like any labyrinth, our minds have a way out. It's not always obvious, but it's there. One of the things that's helped me is combining the wisdom of the ages with some modern, practical techniques. Ancient teachings often talk about the mind as both a powerful ally and a tricky adversary. I love how some traditions describe negative thoughts as mind clouds. They're passing, temporary, and not as solid as they seem. When I picture my thoughts as these fleeting clouds, it helps me remember that they're not permanent. They're just part of the ever-changing weather in my mind. And here's the thing, it's okay if it doesn't happen overnight. This process is a journey, not a sprint. Each time we guide ourselves out of the labyrinth, we get a little better at it. We learn the paths, the tricks, and the turns, and over time, the labyrinth becomes less daunting and more familiar. It becomes a place where we can navigate with a bit more ease and a lot more compassion for ourselves. What strategies or insights have made a difference for you? Drop a comment below and let's get a conversation going. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you found this video helpful, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more content like this. Bye.